Hey, it's Jay. Are you aware that despite running for 12 fairly successful seasons, Murder, She Wrote spawned exactly one spinoff? I have a feeling that the audience that finds my videos knows this, but I can probably bet that you have not seen any of it. Why would you? It's not streaming on any service, and the only commercial release was in 2012 in Australia, Region 4. I have a lot of questions. But it is on YouTube, kinda. Some of this footage is pretty shaky, but it's watchable, and I already did it, so you don't have to. You're welcome. Let's talk about every appearance of Harry McGraw, starting with his first appearance in Season 1, where he breaks into Jessica's house. Harry McGraw is a noir detective in every sense of the word, only sparing us the internal dialogue, although the analogies he makes feels ripped out of a Chandler novel.
I'm gonna nail that Sicilian bricklayer to the barn door.
He's whip-smart and fast-talking, willing to lie his way through any problem, break and enters on the regular, and is constantly getting punched in the gut by some thug over a minor infraction. A hard-on-his-luck wiseapple who just has a few questions and maybe might push you around if he needs to. He's not a bad guy, though. He'd never con ya, even though he is always in debt to some bookie. He's making an honest living on the hard streets of Boston. He's played by Jerry Orbach, who you might know as the hard-nosed detective Lenny Briscoe, or the man who attempted to put Baby in the Corner in Dirty Dancing, and actually was a real stand-up guy, trusted his daughter enough to fund an abortion, then assisted when the procedure was botched. A good man. His reticence about Patrick Swayze is well-founded and is quickly abandoned. Don't slander Dr. Houseman. I think the casting here is pitch perfect. He has a real detective face, you know? Sure, he yells all his lines, but he's got an earnestness about it that reads through pretty well. He's a real character, always working angle, and wants to know if you have the racing sheets. Harry is breaking into Jessica's house because his business partner, who Jessica just hired to research for her, just got, and he needs to figure out who did it. His partner was working on 3 cases when he was killed, so he's checking in on all of them for a motive. Jessica knows when she is being tailed and doublebacks to demand Harry explain himself, and eventually hears enough to know there's a mystery afoot, so she's going to bop down to Boston and take a meeting with Barbara Babcock at the Feminism magazine. What's her awesome pitch? Why, an article about her dead husband, Frank.
What I had in mind was a remembrance of my marriage. I'm sorry you never knew Frank. I think you'd have liked him. He was a kind and loving man who taught me to value the small joys of everyday life.
She's usually better than this, I promise. I do not know why she thought they would want that. Maybe this is just her snooping and she had to come up with a bad pitch so she didn't have to actually write an article. While she's there, she runs into Harry in a cowboy hat, pretending to be a Texan, and they decide to team up and share notes, with Jessica working the elite circuit and discovering all of their non-related terrible secrets, while Harry hits the streets and gets punched in the face. It sucks to be Harry. Anyway, after all this, they listen to the answering machine and realize it was this bozo who was also slumming around the office. Harry gives Jessica a ride home, trying to convince her to get into the PI game, which she declines. I don't blame her. Harry gets punched a lot. We get another appearance of Harry when Angela is in Boston for an auction. One of her old actor friends had an illicit affair with a young famous actor who had a severe social meltdown and was found dead, assumed self-afflicted, and her diary from her final days is going up for bid. He wants the diary destroyed so she can rest in peace. He can't go himself to bid because of the scandal, so he gives Jessica $1 million and tells her to go buy it for him. She heads to the auction house and immediately announces why she's there and who she represents, and the auctioneer gets flirty and tries to gift her a cool chess set he was going to sell, and she insists on writing him a check for its worth. She will not accept strange gifts from men. She knows where that leads. Murder! Okay, the murder is unrelated to the chess set, and it's a real mystery how her actor's friend's body got into that dresser. He was supposed to be in Italy. Just ask Jessica, who just received a personal check for $1 million from the deceased. So Jessica gets arrested on suspicion of murder and is taken downtown, where Harry McGraw is standing around jawing with an officer and happens to see her come in. He's going to take her case, even though she is quickly released due to lack of opportunity. So they are discussing the case and how the diary she was supposed to bid on disappeared, and she figures this chess set she was gifted probably has a secret compartment in it, and she was right. Didn't even need to poke around with it. She knew exactly where to push to pop it open. Are we absolutely sure she didn't steal the diary? So she reads the diary to figure out who would have a motive to kill the actor, while Harry gives her some sleepy time tea, makes a copy of the diary, which he starts peddling to interested parties around town. Jessica decides to return the diary to the auction house, only to get caught standing over a dead body again. They follow all the leads and Jess finds out about Harry's double dealing and shakes her head at him, but Harry saves Jessica when a guy holds a gun to her, so they're even. After all the suspects are thoroughly eliminated, Jessica realizes this Al character in the diary is probably that Albert guy who works at the auction house, and yes, it turns out he is her crazy ex who killed everyone for insanity reasons. Ugh, I hate it when the killer is just some creepy guy. For what I assume are backdoor pilot reasons, we get an extra long episode in season 3 where Jessica becomes a boxing manager. Harry has called her down to Boston to check out this boxer he has now, and how he's going to be in a big ticket match and score big. All he needs is $5,000 to handle the expenses. For some reason, she gives him the money, and when she hears something is amiss about the boxing match, she heads down to Boston to discover that Harry has been arrested for murder. Turns out he had a row the night before with Adam West, in which he discharges his firearm, and then Adam is found dead from a bullet from Harry's gun. Seems pretty definitive, but Jessica manages to convince the lieutenant to let him out on bail so they can spend an absurd amount of time investigating. The length of this episode somehow makes it easier for me to forget what happens. It's a lot of conversations in the park. We do get some Harry time, where he gets to narrate his actions with his usual mishegas.
The shillelagh and the pizza belly were having their jollies. I just wanted to crawl into a hole.
Where we learn that Harry McGraw does, in fact, fuck, and we get to see the diner set that they have been working on. They don't introduce any of the characters from the spin-off show, so it's not a good backdoor pilot. But, you know, if you want to see Harry McGraw get laid, happens in this episode. Anyway, the only exciting thing that happens is LeVar Burton does a whole sting operation to ask her like 3 questions, and we get to watch a very long news broadcast about the upcoming boxing match while Jessica puts on her shoes. This was absolutely necessary because the killer was the other boxer who killed Adam West with a shotgun and put the bullet Harry put into the couch earlier in the wound. Obviously. So that case is solved and Harry pays Jessica back as he had sold the story of the case to the news and the boxer is retiring to a dairy farm in Indiana. Best of luck with that guy. Hope that works out for him. For the 1987 season, a spin-off of Murder, She Wrote starring Jerry Orbach and Barbara Babcock was commissioned. Headed by co-creator Peter Fisher, we're given a quirky side of the underbelly of Boston, featuring the relationship between private investigator and hopeless gambler Harry McGraw and his friend and office neighbor Eleanor McGinnis, a widowed lawyer who is struggling to get by. They are assisted by 2 young members of their family. Harry is supported by EJ, his niece, and Eleanor has recently hired her nephew, Steve Lacy. These 4 are our central cast, although it's mostly Harry. He does a lot of the heavy lifting and getting punched in the stomach, but everyone has their skill set. EJ is smart and great at information gathering. Eleanor is a lawyer and moves easily in rich circles, and Steve, as he will not stop telling us, is a tax lawyer, so if they need help hiding their non-existent profits in an offshore account, he's your guy. He's actually a real jackass to start, only softening offering other talents after a lesson in hard knocks from Harry. And they're just trying to get by. They have some allies in the community. There's Harry's ex-partner in the police force, Howard Sternhagen, who has been busted down to file room attendant and is just trying to keep his pension. He's also married to Harry's ex-wife, who we never see, so that's an extremely weird relationship. Especially since Harry is constantly asking Howard to go through the records and look stuff up for him. A real toxic relationship, really. Harry will not leave this guy alone. There's also the assistant district attorney Tyler Chase, who is a strange creep. He is constantly asking Eleanor out all the time, to an uncomfortable degree, and despite her constant rejections, she still occasionally needs his help, so they leverage his weird crush in a lot of situations. It's not clear what his goal is. Marriage, surely, although it's not clear he's actually attracted to Eleanor. Okay, hang on. We need to talk about this damn guy. We need to talk about all these guys. Let's start a list of all the weird guys featured in the Law and Harry McGraw from worst to best. So, Tyler Chase, he gets a title credit because he's Peter Haskell, even though he rarely matters in any given episode. My notes barely mention him, but they wrote this guy as just the oddest, cloying little social climber whose every decision seems to be politically motivated in order to curry favor with the public in general. He's one of those guys who's always thinking about his image, preparing to press charges on literally everyone who comes into his station, has to be hard on crime, have 2 different suspects for murder that can't rationally have both done it. I mean, one of them did it, right? So he's going to hold both of them. Who cares about their civil rights? He's got to keep his image. And yet, in his pursuit of the perfect wife in the form of Eleanor McGinnis, he does some shit that would absolutely sink his campaign. Eleanor's office is floundering, and she's attending some weird party where Tyler shows up with a date. He is deeply embarrassed about this and wants to assure her that he is still very interested in being romantically involved with her. In fact, he heard that she could use some work. He can get her a job with the city, under him. In a moment of pique, Eleanor decides to accept the job, which was a mistake. Tyler kicks a guy out of his office so she's next to him and asks her where she wants to go to dinner that night. If I didn't know any better, there sure feels like there's a quid to this quo, or at least a perception of one. Luckily, she smarts up and bails on the job, sticking to her principles and away from this odd, gangly creep. Although he's probably so odd because his intentions have nothing to do with sex, as we see Eleanor literally throw herself at him and he demurs. He's blustering and trying to turn the conversation to anything else, and spends the whole night on the couch so he can wake up early to offer her breakfast and plan the day. What is going on here? Is this a closeted queer person looking for a marriage of convenience so he can continue his pursuit of power without seeming like a weirdo? Because he is not fighting the weirdo accusations. Anyway, yeah, Tyler Chase sucks. He's just a real asshole to Harry all the time, and his persistent harassment of Eleanor is the worst. He's the lowest on the list because he's in every episode. They thought this was a character we wanted to see a lot. I blame Peter Haskell personally. What's he gonna do about it? This is some rich guy who's doing some shady treason level nonsense. I cannot remember what exactly, plutonium or whatever. And the government is on his trail and has made up a person to distract him from the informant they've placed in his organization. This Mr. Chapman apparently has tapes of Devereaux's dirty deals, and also they bought a hotel room and will call tickets to the opera for Mr. Chapman for some reason. Naturally, Harry McGraw claims the ticket by accident, leading Devereaux's guys to kidnap and torture him. This is bad times. Luckily, he escapes, but is still too drugged up, so he crashes his car. He continues to be mistaken for Mr. Chapman while he tries to figure out what's happening, until he decides, fuck it, I'm Mr. Chapman now. This guy didn't exist anyway. It was just some spy nonsense. There's a sting, and the government is thankful and pays for his various expenses. Harry tries to also get them to pay off his bookie. Oh, that incorrigible rascal. He has a serious gambling problem. Alec Harris is some stud with a mustache who married a wealthy woman and is accused of his wife's murder. He's a personal friend to Eleanor and also is interested in becoming more now that his old lady is out of the picture. He's a real smooth gentleman, but it's mostly his voice. His demeanor is kind of pitiful and fake.
I know how this sounds, but I'm telling you the truth.
Since, yeah, he did do it, he set it up to frame the son, who's played by Kirk's son, but the son caught wise and counter-framed him. But that's a twist at the end. We spend the whole episode watching Eleanor fall for his charms while McGraw goes out of his way to cockblock him, including paying a man to steal his car and stealing money from his bank account. Listen, I know he's a murderer and was planning similar things for Eleanor after she realized it, but this is a bit over the line, man. It's giving toxic vibes, Harry, but we'll get to that. No, not that one. Although I will at one point make a video about him, he's just low on the list. He's no Harry McGraw, is all I'm saying. This Charlie is just some slub who got tricked into murdering a rich man by some lady who wanted to take over his estate. They trick him into sitting for an interview, and they stay long enough for Harry to be able to go to his beach house, have a long conversation with the evil lady, and get back. His fault for not bailing when Eleanor starts talking about sorority life. Clearly she's wasting your time. Hey, it's the EPA guy that was absolutely correct about the Ghostbusters. He talks his missing partner into kidnapping his wife on their boat to ransom, then shooting him to make it look like a robbery. You know, those boat robberies that are common, and using his car phone to create his alibi. Harry knows he did it from the start, he just can't prove it, so he confronts him about it, which Atherton wanders away from, and then comes back to find that Harry has changed his mind. Something just washed up in Bridgeport needs him to check it out. Then everyone waits several hours until Atherton finally decides to check and gets caught in a sting. Everybody loves stings. I quite like him as a Columbo-style villain because he's constantly scoffing in disbelief that anyone would think he, a man in deep with the mob, might have a motive for murder. How dare? At one point, Harry McGraw takes the skipper to get a new jacket, and it's staffed by this terrible dad and his terrible son. Hot tip, if you put up a little altar to your departed son and keep reminding your alive son how much better the dead son was, you're gonna have a bad relationship. Suddenly the two of you are throwing bricks through windows of a local diner to try to chase them out, and you end up arrested for it. And then you realize we're just a B-plot and not important to the episode at all. Jefferson Randolph is just a simple country lawyer who hired Harry to do some footwork for him, mainly by going to a rich lady's boy toy and threatening him with a gun. Then Harry quits because this guy's a jerk, and he's not in the rest of the episode. I just hate his vibes. During one case, Harry finds himself in a rivalry with a young hotshot private investigator who has a laptop, and is therefore able to outpace Harry's legwork and solve the case, leading Harry to have an existential crisis about being an old wash-up. Of course, his intuition kicks in and he figures out a scheme to get the paintings back, and this jerk proves himself a coward and therefore not a real PI, just a dork with a laptop. There's a pool hustler stealing people's paycheck at Gilhooly's, and Harry really wants to take him down a peg. So he comes up with this whole scheme to hustle him back with a young pool whiz kid at the college, except the hustler has already gotten to him and was doing a counter hustle. It's a really complicated scam for what is ultimately $1,000. Not nothing, but not worth a several day long con job. And it falls apart when the young player falls for EJ because, EJ is very charming. She's great. I like how she gets better at PI stuff, but it still makes her really nervous. It's cute. Anyway, they counter hustle the hustler by getting good old Lester to finish out the game, and I guess they split that $1,000 4 ways now. Oh, no, Lester gets all of it? Oh, okay, sure. Good for Lester. So, in an absurdly comedic moment, Harry gets some counterfeit money he was trying to return stolen from him by a couple of incompetent bank robbers who ran into him as they were fleeing the bank, and they take off with the fake money. They're recognized immediately by a witness, and Harry heads over to their dingy apartment to get the money back. Unfortunately, Liddy and Squiggy here put the money in the wash, and their mom started laundry, destroying the money. Just a real couple of goobers. Flash Gordon is some loan shark who is a bit much and hangs out in a car dealership for some reason. I just found it notable that his name is Flash Gordon, and they don't even point out that's the name of another famous character. Also, he's played by the most interesting man in the world. Gilhooly owns Gilhooly's, the diner that they are always eating at, and he is an old misogynist boxer who thinks the right way to handle legal disputes is to march into the developer's office and punch him in the face. He's not a bad guy, just an old-timey guy, making him the worst kind of guy. You know every single president this guy voted for, is what I'm saying. But he's played by the skipper, so cool. I'm just glad he's not in every episode. It's our old friend Ken Swafford, back as some journalist who sucks and ruins the case with his journalism. Wasn't really an important role, but it was a paycheck for Ken. I'm always happy to see him in his big face. This is Harry's bookie, who Harry is constantly dodging because he is in debt. I expected him to be more of an intimidating character, not this schlubby old grandpa who is raising his precocious granddaughter all by himself. He got scammed into investing into a fake pasta franchise, a real pasta mania, and then gets arrested for murder, which puts his granddaughter Charlie at risk of being put into the system. But everyone in the office loves her, so they convince a social worker to let her stay with them, because that's the kind of show this is. Of course there's a precocious little girl that helps identify some bank robbers. Very low risk. Anyway, they catch the real killer and Spinelli and Charlie are fine, I assume. We don't get any updates. Harry knows a hockey player, Rudy, from way back, and he's about to finally succeed in the regional hockey league if it wasn't for his shithead gambler father who was in deep with Flash Gordon. They both get arrested for his murder because the dad was framed and Rudy framed himself to get his dad off. It turned out the owner of the hockey rink was also deep in debt with Flash Gordon. They say his name so many times, and not once do they call him a space cadet or bring up Bright and Blessed or other Flash Gordon things. I don't know, I've never actually seen Flash Gordon. Maybe I just don't know the lore. Hey, it's Robert Costanzo! Love this guy. Love that no matter who he is playing, he still uses the same Brooklyn accent, even if it doesn't make sense. Like when he played a full-blooded Italian man in Murder, She Wrote.
Great artists have temperaments.
Or here, where he's supposed to be a Boston dirtbag. He should sound like Matt Damon in that one movie.
Are you kidding? He hit a couple of lucky hands.
But he's a character actor, and he's got just the one character. Anyway, he has a bad night at the poker table because Steve can read cards. Feels unsportsmanlike. I don't really like Steve. Ron Masick is in the pilot as a detective on the force that hates Harry's guts, and frankly I wish he had stuck around for the whole show. He's charming enough as Sheriff Mesker, and now he's both charming and mean, and it's a good look on him. He can call Harry an asshole all he wants. George Clooney was in one of these episodes as the son of a mobster who gets in trouble with the law when an enforcer dies. It wasn't him, he's a red herring. But you know, very little George Clooney. He's wearing very short shorts in this episode if you want to see his gams. The regular guy behind the bar at Gilhoo's is named Cookie, because of course he is. I got nothing against him, he's probably a nice guy. He knows enough not to serve Harry alcohol if he asks, because Harry's a recovering alcoholic. Yeah, that's right, Harry McGraw has character growth. So, Cookie's cool. At one point they need to find a wetsuit in the woods, so they call this gang of ex-car thieves to poke around the woods for a few hours to find it, and he takes them out for pizza afterwards. I like them, they seem like nice kids. The whole thing with Rudy and Flash Gordon is both made more difficult by Steve blowing out the office's entire phone system, so they call the phone company, and the phone company sends Wendell. And then he just becomes part of the gang for the episode, always hanging around, answering telephone questions, looking up numbers for Harry. He knows a really good pizza place they should try. Real sweet guy. This is probably the weirdest of the weird guys, who you think is going to be an imposing figure considering how everyone talks about his arrival to town with urgency. But when you meet Mr. Rappaport, he's just a polite little man, kinda talks like Mark Twain. He's a professional gambler, you see. He knows where the best games are, and he likes Harry. He wants to help Harry, actually. Since he is a professional gambler, he is basically a lie detector, and the guy at the game last night who received terrible news about a death was lying, so he wants to help Harry investigate the murder. Harry tells Rappaport it's too dangerous and he should butt out, so this maniac takes matters into his own hands and breaks into the wrong house to snoop around, getting punched and battered by the unsuspecting residents. But it gives Harry a clue that allows him to track down the assassin. Unfortunately, they don't get to him in time as the murderer already murked him. So Harry steals his car and develops a scheme, which is definitely a plan. So they give Steve a cheap wig and have him follow the guy around for a few days, dropping him enough little clues to suspect that Steve is the assassin's brother. They flew EJ to Las Vegas to do this. They couldn't just reroute the phone or something, she had to physically be there to answer the phone. And she hates Vegas.
Vegas? I hate Vegas.
After dropping all this paranoia on the guy, they invite him to a card game, and he arrives to find all the players dead, shot en masse by Steve, who demands an explanation on what happened to his brother. This gets a confession out of him, and everyone on the floor stands up. We did it, everybody. This would not be the plan I would have done, but it gets points for being melodramatic. Rappaport has so much fun playing detective for this one, it's adorable. I know, I told you about Howard Sternhagen already, but he's such a lovable dope. Always down the dumps, trying and failing to keep Harry out of his office, abusing their friendship to get official info. At one point, Harry gets Howard in serious trouble by accidentally giving out Harry's badge number after upping a suspect, and Harry doesn't even apologize when he realizes he did it, just tells Howard it must be a mistake or something. It's just such a weird dynamic, especially considering Harry's wife left him for Howard. If anything, Howard should be the big dog in this relationship, and yet he's powerless against Harry's intrusions. I mean, sure, Harry keeps it cool, making Sternhagen look good to his superiors when he can, but how did these two even become friends in the first place? Well, we kinda get an answer to that in one of the Goop episodes when we actually learn that the Harry McGraw we know is a recent development, when he loses his memory of the past several years and resets to a younger, much more turned down version of him.
I guess I'm supposed to know you, right?
This Harry McGraw is very reticent and almost polite, which means his rough personality is either a front or the product of years of private detective-related trauma. They have to recreate Harry's previous day so they can get Harry to solve the case again, and everywhere they go, the person is mad at Harry because last time he was there, he was a complete asshole. It really makes him think about his life.
I'm sorry, but this detective business, I mean, It's such a sordid and degrading way to make a living. First thing I'm going to do when I get my memory back is try to find some other line of work.
But then he hits his head when someone tries to murder him again. And good news, McGraw is back. And he doesn't care anymore. He loves this shit. The episode puts a real focus on how much of Harry McGraw is just belligerence and lying. He does it with zero hesitation. Just immediately pulls out a fable to get the info he needs, and if that doesn't work, he'll just wait until you leave the room and go through your shit. The number of times he bursts into the room at full volume just being a real dick to the first person he sees. He's really pushy, but you gotta admit, it works. And while he has no compunction about theft or fraud or issuing threats, he's got a code of honor, meaning that criminals are all bums and he would never associate with them. Just other rugged old white guys who are occasionally violent misogynists and cops. He's an ex-cop himself, who quit because of a bum knee, not like a noble reason. But he's a damn good detective. And then there's Eleanor McGinnis, who is a perfectly fine lawyer. We see her win a couple of cases and give reasonable legal advice, but she is mostly just kinda around. She's such a prim and proper lady that it is funny juxtaposed against Harry McGraw. At least I think that's what the joke is, but it's overshadowed by the intense romantic tension between these two. They are constantly intruding upon each other's offices and lives. Harry is always taking her out to eat. It's usually Gulhoolies, but still. And Eleanor spends a lot of time fending off flirtations from others, because she's still grieving her husband, Matt McGinnis, who died of a heart attack 2 years ago. Matt meant a lot to both of them, a very kind and dedicated lawyer who was in AA with Harry. A big hole to fill for both of them, which explains why Eleanor always feels frazzled, because people won't stop telling her how great her dead husband is and how she's not as good as him. It's rough on her, and it's especially hard on her birthday, when she just won a big case finding a man innocent of embezzlement at the super fancy retirement home run by a doctor with a cult-like following. For some reason, a woman calls her a spawn of Satan because of this. It's pretty weird.
Wait until you're old and sick and alone. See how you feel then, child of Lucifer.
You think she just offended a murderer. So, this has her feeling a little bit unmoored. Her life isn't going the way she wants, when Harry shows that he remembered her birthday and he's got a swell gift.
It's a great day for a birthday. It's a greater day for kicking up your heels. Light a candle.
So she's had enough of this and immediately leaves for a fancy resort. Unfortunately, things are not going away, because this jackal immediately tries to join her for dinner. And then Harry shows up to apologize and causes a scene. And then she gets run off the road. This is a lot.
This is supposed to be the happiest day of my life.
She's finding Harry particularly unhelpful and goes to spend a night at Tyler Chase's house to piss him off. This is not a rational decision, but luckily Chase is asexual or something, so nothing happens. She wakes up mortified and bails out of there to join Steve at a rich diplomat office, where he immediately starts hitting on her. For the love of God, men, please leave Eleanor alone. But she's into it this time, and they go play tennis, which I guess is a polite thing to do before the afternoon delight, while Harry tries to find her because he suspects she's being targeted. He's right, she is being targeted, because some random guy has gone full cult killer and wants to punish her for hurting the good doctor's reputation. Which doctor? The doctor from the beginning, the one who she got called a spawn of Satan for indirectly implying he was guilty of a crime. That's what led this guy to kidnap her, at gunpoint. Harry is following, of course, so she starts speeding up and freaking out the kidnapper while she tries to put on her seatbelt. Once secured, she takes a breath, then slams into a streetlight. This causes the man to slam his head into the dashboard and tumble out of the car, stumble towards Harry, and die, I assume. We get no follow-up with the whole cult-like devotion to a doctor who might be in trouble for embezzlement. I guess everyone is just chill with it after this? No, instead we say goodbye to the diplomat, who's pulled away from, what is this, a dining hall? What kind of establishment has a band set with these 3 songs in this order? Anyway, this gives everyone a chance to dance with each other, but in a way where it's clear they aren't going to discuss their relationship at all. Because again, why would they? Why would they resolve this weird tension where everyone is obviously pining for someone who is clearly mutually attracted to them, when there are so many hijinks afoot. This is serialized television in the 80s. You must reset every time. I expected the series to not be very good, well, with there being only a shortened season of it and then never really spoken of again. Harry McGraw came back to Murder, She Wrote, but he didn't bring along any of this stuff. When we meet him again in season 5, he no longer has a detective license, as it was taken from him by a corrupt cop. And while we do get a reappearance of Cookie and Sternhagen, he does not mention Eleanor or EJ. So all I can assume is that they lost touch when Harry lost his license and EJ had to go back to Ohio, while Eleanor just bit the bullet and chose a marriage of convenience with Tyler Chase. Ugh, tragic. This show was alright. I would not go so far as recommending it. It's very silly. But it's a real fun performance from Jerry Orbach. I like EJ a lot, everyone's competent, and if you love character actors as much as I do, we get a lot of business. Oh hell, there are still 3 more Harry McGraw episodes to talk about. We'll keep this quick. I've gone on too long about that goofy spinoff. Like I said, he appears again in season 5, when Jessica runs into a guy on the street who she is sure is her good friend she hasn't seen in a while. So much so that when his family informs her that no, he died, she decides to hire Harry to track him down. Sometimes Jessica can't leave well enough alone, and she almost feels bad about it when she finds out the man is definitely dead now. It's fine, it's not her meddling that doomed him. The people after him already knew he faked his death. You see, he was a whistleblower for a major corporation and has testified and was being harassed, so decided to fake his own death and disappear. Of course it didn't work and was a terrible idea, especially since they still went out of their way to make sure he had no life insurance so there was no fraud. Why didn't he ask for witness protection if he was willing to fake his death? Maybe tagging the FBI in this, since they are the ones who put your life in danger. I don't know, he didn't make many good decisions here. He had a second chance to tell Jessica the truth and end this, and he still didn't. Anyway, it was the corrupt cop who took Harry's license away, which means Harry just gets his license back. I'm sure that's how it works. He also appears in 2 episodes in the Animatics Season 7. One of them is a horse racing episode, so I don't care. It was a different horse. It's always a different horse. But this time we find out from the horse's mouth, because we have a lady who can talk to horses. A horse gave testimony in this one. Harry's here because he loves horse racing. That's literally why. Jessica hired him and flew him out because she remembers he loves horse racing. It's cute, actually. The other is a season finale where Jessica is given a novel with incriminating details by Schneider, and it's a whole stupid affair. But because of some major coincidences, Harry comes to Cabot Cove and gets yelled at by Ron Masick again. Doesn't Jessica have some wacky friends? Then at the end they do a title drop and break the 4th wall.
Right, Jessica?
Right, Harry.
And that, as they say, is all she wrote.
It's eerie. Jerry Orbach had already started his 13-year run on Law and Order by this point, so he was too busy to return to Murder, She Wrote after season 7. Instead, when we needed a down-on-his-luck private eye with questionable moral character, we got Charlie Garrett, who again, I will get to later. But I think Jerry Orbach really took a lot of Harry into his Lenny Briscoe character. He's still the gruff detective with a quippy line for everything. It's just a much more toned-down space. Law and Order is not a comedy show, it's a propaganda show. But there are no bad Harry McGraw episodes of Murder, She Wrote, really. Because in each one, you at least get to see Harry McGraw, and the pure chemistry between these two is great. They get and respect each other. Probably because Angela Lansbury and Jerry Orbach were lifelong friends and worked together several times before. And will continue to work together as Mrs. Potts and Lumiere in the Beauty and the Beast franchise. Yeah, you absolutely forgot that Jerry Orbach voices the extremely French Candle in Beauty and the Beast. As for the spin-off, I think it's a fun show. Too bad it didn't grab audiences. And while the schemes are frequently extremely confusing, at least you can see Harry bumble through with his usual charm. Alright, I've decided later is now. Let's get the Charlie Garrett episodes out of the way while we're talking about Murder, She Wrote recurring characters. And we get to talk about how Jessica solved the Kennedy assassination. More Murder, She Wrote in a couple weeks. Come on back. Bye.